Alright, welcome back folks to Did Syd Barrett and Pink Floyd the Beatles? And again, in this series, in this little mini-series that I'm putting together, I want to examine the music of the Beatles and kind of draw any connections or influences between the Beatles and Pink Floyd and Syd Barrett, and that'll be from Syd Barrett and Pink Floyd into the Beatles, but also from the Beatles into Pink Floyd and Syd Barrett. And I will point out that so far, if you'll notice, most of the influences have been from the Beatles into Pink Floyd and Syd Barrett. That's just judged solely on time frame. Now, of course, time frame is kind of a tricky thing because you never know whose idea is what when. You only know when you see something, and then if you see it again later. Now, if someone is choosing to put things together anonymously, it can ruin that whole thing. But I will say, from just my own opinion now, we do know that Mr. Barrett was a fan of the Beatles. We've discussed this before. In Mr. Palacios' book on page 249, he specifically mentions that Mr. Barrett mentioned liking two bands, Cream and the Beatles. So he very likely was paying attention to the Beatles for some reason. And of course, we recognize that there is a lot of shared studio time, and Mr. McCartney and Mr. Lennon had attended a number of psychedelic events, so they were aware of the underground, of course, and that shouldn't be surprising to anyone with a name like the Beatles. So I'm going to kind of do an introduction for this episode where I'm going to discuss the contributions of a number of black American artists and musicians, and we just had Martin Luther King Day in the United States. I think it's appropriate. I'll give the time frames for the scheduling of this episode. If you would like to kind of move on to the actual breakdown of the songs, I understand that. I hope you don't do that. I hope you will consider the contributions of a number of black American artists to this music genre, and I'll kind of throw together a few thoughts on each one of them really quickly. Now, this is not going to be an all-encompassing list, but certainly I think these are ones that come to my mind when I'm discussing a lot of this music. So let's run through those, and then I'm going to do a breakdown of 3 albums. Now, those 3 albums are going to be the Revolver album, Sgt. Pepper Lonely Hearts Club Band, and then I'll finish with Magic Mystery Tour. Now, for me, this is like the absolute height of the Beatles psychedelic period. So I'm going to do, initially for each song, I'm going to do just a lyric breakdown, and then in that I'm just going to note any outstanding poetry in there or any influences in later music. And then after that, then I'm going to go ahead and take a look at other thoughts that might be associated with that music. So, and then in the end, I'll discuss possibly some personal kind of things. So, and that's just my opinion stuff and some things that are going on for me. So I'll put that at the very end, and if you don't want to watch that, you don't need to. So, and that encompasses not just really me, but the channel, I'll say. So, let's go ahead and get started then. So, one of the first people that I've noted here is Miss Ronnie Spector. Now, she just recently passed away, and I think she's worth noting here, of course, because she toured England, and she did actually tour together with the Rolling Stones and the Beatles. So, I think it's appropriate to kind of note her here. She has some wonderful quotes, and I just want to point out that she was kind of a trendsetter for women singers, women front, I don't want to say front man, but a front woman, I don't know what you would call that, but she had a wonderful voice and a wonderful personality, and she has a book that she's written, and it's a little bit brutal. She mentions kind of her experience with the industry and her experiences with her ex-husband Phil Spector. And you can check that out and some of the things that she says and some of the allegations she makes. Again, I mean, it's her book and it's her point of view, so I won't go into some of the things that she says, other than to say that she does note some of the problems with certain people in the industry that she experienced. Now, I'm bringing that up, of course, because in Peeling Syd, we did a book review of Fortunate Son by Mr. Fogarty, and he also discusses some of the kind of background, I don't know what you want to, corruption, I guess you could say, of that exists with the industry. Not totally through the industry, I assume, but certainly his experiences with it that kind of soured the industry for him. Soured his experience with the industry for him. So there again, there's someone, Ronnie Spector, who's kind of saying something along the same lines, and I don't know. I mean, it's hard to kind of, from my point of view, it's hard to feel sorry for a lot of these folks because they became famous and they got to live a life that was going out and doing things and singing, and it's stuff that a lot of people would dream of. I mean, imagine being someone that's a worker that goes into a work floor for packing or for welding all day, every day, then you go home, that's your whole life, and some folks are kind of upset about their life and writing books about it and whatever else, and the average person that's working is also living a life that has problems, but they don't get to really talk about it and write books about it. So at any rate, I do think Ronnie Spector's story is important because now we're seeing kind of an uptick in violence against women, and it's very disturbing to me. This is my own personal kind of view on the topic here now. There are a lot of problems that are occurring now with work for a lot of people, and unfortunately, I think a lot of people are taking it out on women because a lot of women are vulnerable, and that often is how things happen. People take advantage of vulnerable people and vulnerable sections of the population. So when I was quite young, I decided that I would not allow myself to be the kind of person that would ever do something like that to a woman because of personal experiences. So I hope that people now are seeing kind of the animosity towards one another and are resolving not to participate in it, but to learn from this and decide that they will not partake in destructive behavior. And this will be important, I guess, for a quote later on. At any rate, let's continue on. Another person that I kind of discuss really quickly is MLK. I have a couple quotes from Mr. Martin Luther King. And it's important to me that he is recognized as someone who recognized the importance of music. And he was, of course, a very religious man, but he also recognized the importance of the contributions of music to the overall psyche and spirit of people. And he spoke on that on numerous occasions. So I wanted to include him for that reason. Another person that's very important is Mr. Miles Davis. If you don't have Kind of Blue, I really suggest you get Kind of Blue. It's an album that people will listen to 500 years from now. It is an absolutely outstanding, astonishing piece of work. And Mr. Miles Davis and his contributions to rock and roll are something that a lot of people don't realize. It's very easy to overlook the influences of jazz on rock and roll, but they are there, particularly in the 60s period, in my opinion. Chuck Berry, Mr. Chuck Berry, I wanted to include him because of his contributions to rock and roll, the development of rock and roll. Little Richard, I've discussed Little Richard before. For me, personally, he was the first voice that I heard growing up, and I thought, that's amazing. That person's voice is just full of energy. It is so brilliant. It is just a brilliant sound, and coming from that man. And we have to realize, of course, that a lot of these people, like Chuck Berry and Little Richard, had their music kind of taken from them by white Americans, covered by white American musicians, and used, and then that was repackaged and sold to the American public as kind of acceptable forms of rock and roll, which is really unfortunate, but there's no denying that that was kind of going on. Another person is Holland Wolf, and I included Holland Wolf, of course, because he's a deep influence on Mr. Barrett. Bo Diddley, another influence on Mr. Barrett, a cited reference on Mr. Barrett. Now, there is Mr. Steve Bobinski, who does a lot of cartoons, and he recently did a cartoon for Double O Bo. I suggest you check out Mr. Bobinski's videos. They're really funny. They're awesome. He does a great job in putting together kind of, I don't want to just call them cartoons, but they are caricatures of Mr. Barrett and Pink Floyd, and he puts together music videos for them. They're really great, so I do suggest you check them out. No affiliation whatsoever, I just suggest that you check those out. And of course, Double O Bo is a song about Bo Diddley. I also want to kind of discuss Nina Simone really quick, and she's a tricky one because she was part of the Black Power movement, and it's not tricky because of that, but because I think she is an example of someone who became so frustrated with the way things were that she got angry, and to me that's completely understandable, to think that someone is going to, especially someone enlightened like her, and perhaps she had other issues on the side. I believe that she also was a woman that was suffering some abuse in marriage, but she is without a doubt someone that's extremely talented. And when I don't particularly like her voice, but when I hear her voice together with the piano, it transforms into this single entity. It really is amazing. And if you are not a fan of Nina Simone, I'll say just on the music side, she is an example of a person like Jimi Hendrix who is able to completely evolve into a new thing. She's completely able to dissolve who she is and become like one with the music that she's making. It's amazing. So for that reason, of course, I want to include her in here. But also because I think it's important to recognize that that some people become very frustrated with life in general, and I don't want to vilify them for that. Wherever they are, and whoever they are, so many people can become very, very frustrated, and it's important for them to have constructive outlets and for them to be heard, because not everyone's life is fair. Many people do suffer, and they shouldn't suffer in silence. In my opinion, it would be much better for everyone if they were able to speak their mind freely, and then a discussion could happen about everyone's experiences. And for me, she's someone like that. I do not always like the things that she has to say, but I think it is important that she is heard. Now, one of the things that's important for me about Miss Simone's quote, which regards being able to step away from a table if it's not serving love, is that this is something that is tied inherently to a more, well, what I suspect will be a more futuristic form of protest. In other words, not cooperating. And that form of not cooperating and not supporting is a financial one. And for me personally, I recently spent like 3 days trying to reset my phone. So I got rid of my old phone company, my old phone contract, and I got in with a new company. And the reason for that is that I found out that the phone company I was with had executives that were apparently supporting the development of right-wing media. And so I don't want to have anything to do with that. So it took 3 days of time, and it's deliberate, I think, on the part of companies to, once they have you within a contract or within a dynamic, to make it extremely difficult to extricate yourself from that. And that could even just involve ignoring you, so that you're forced to constantly keep paying them. But it was important enough for me to go through that process so that I wouldn't be supporting a company or a group of executives. Now, I suspect now that that company wasn't doing it. It was just a group of executives. I don't know. At any rate, I had to make that choice, and I think that that choice is captured in Miss Nina Simone's statement that if you are willing to step away from the table whenever you realize that there isn't a sentiment of positivity being expressed in the relationship, then you still have some kind of impact on it, which is important. So the last person I want to discuss is Mr. Leadbelly. Leadbelly's a nickname, but a very important man and a very strong influence on Mr. Kurt Cobain. His influence on a number of musicians is significant, and they were, I guess you could say, respectful enough to make sure that his influences on them were noted, which is what I think an artist should do. It's okay to look at other people's work and to use portions of it, so long as you give reference to where it's coming from, and you give respect to that person. You say, this is where this idea is coming from, and so long as people do that, it really is kind of wonderful that they do borrow from other musicians. That's pretty much it for the lead-in. So without further ado, I guess what I would like to do is start going into the songs. So each one of these songs now, if you've been following along, each one of these songs is put together by Mr. George Martin at Abbey Road in EMI Studios. And I'm going to start with the Revolver album, which was released in August of '66, and the first song I want to discuss is Taxman. So if you are able, please call up the lyrics to Taxman, and we'll take a look at it. Now, this is mainly attributed to George Harrison. So let's just look at the lyrics really quick, just the lyrics, and then we'll kind of discuss the song. So they do a count 1, 2, 3, 4, and the first verse kind of says, I'll tell you how it'll be. 1 for you, 19 for me. Okay, so that 19 to 1 ratio is important. We'll discuss that here in a bit. 1 for you, 19 for me. But the rhyme is very simple. Me and B. I'm Taxman, Taxman. They just kind of repeat Taxman there. The next verse is 5% appear too small. You should be thankful I don't take it all. So lyrically, very, very simple end of line rhyme. Small and all, I'm Taxman, Taxman. So right there is the 5%. That is the same ratio of course, as the 1 for you, 19 for me. That's representation of 5%. So if you the bridge goes, if you drive a car, I'll tax the street. If you try to sit, I'll tax your seat. You get too cold, I'll tax the heat. So, and then you take a walk, I'll tax your feet, which is kind of funny. So, street, seat, heat, feet, very simple end of line rhyme. End of line rhyme. Taxman, Taxman. Don't ask what I want it for. Haha, Mr. Wilson, Mr. Heath. So, there's very specific references to Wilson and Heath. I suspect these are some form of politicians that are passing laws for taxation purposes. I'm not going to look at it that deeply. If you don't want to pay some more, haha, Mr. Heath, I'm Taxman, Taxman. If you die, Taxman, declare the pennies on your eyes. Taxman. Okay, well, that's interesting. So, so not only taxing on your eyes, but that is a reference to putting coins on the eyes, which is something the Greeks used to do. You would give 2 coins to pay the ferryman as you cross the river Styx, as your soul went into Hades, not hell for the Greeks, but it's the land of, I don't know exactly what you would call it. It's just simply the underground, the land of Hades, where souls go to be in a very cold, lonely place. Anyway, I'm off to the topic of the lyrics, so let's just stay on the lyrics. Very, very simple line rhyme, end of line rhyme. They end with die and eyes. Nothing interesting poetically going on there. So let's discuss this a little bit. Okay. Now the first thing that I'll kind of note is that for some people, this song is very punk. And the reason it's punk is because it's anti-establishment. The anti-establishment aspect of this song is shown in the anger towards taxation. Now, at this point in time, there was a 95% super tax on the wealthy. And I guess the Beatles qualified for this, and this made Mr. Harrison quite angry. Of course, it wouldn't be difficult to make someone go broke if they were actually paying this tax. 95%. Imagine a 95% tax, income tax. I'm assuming this is an income tax. Now, there are ways around income tax that the wealthy constantly use, such as ownership of stocks. Because you hold on to stocks and they are not showing as profit until you sell them, you can gain in value and never pay tax, which is one way around taxation. There are many, many ways around taxation. And of course, in this case, you could look at 95% income tax as being something that's very, very destructive. I just want to point out, of course, that that a number of Beatles, I can't remember if it was Ringo or George Harrison, were funding Monty Python, and part of the reason for that was because of the heavy taxation. So if they invested in something like Monty Python, the making of the films, then they would avoid taxation. And I think this is something that's kind of understated now. If we look at taxation as it's existing at the current moment, it's extremely low. So I don't know. I mean, good and bad, I guess you could say. The so long as the incentives are there for people to kind of invest in other things, is taxation really bad? I don't know. It's certainly, if they're just hiding the money and encouraging kind of illegal behavior, then it would be bad. The point originally, to get back on topic, was, is this related to punk music? I don't really see it. I mean, some people will say that because it's an anti-establishment kind of a sentiment. For me, no. It's anti-taxation as a rich man. Punk is not about being rich and being angry at people wanting to pay your fair share because you're rich. Obviously, 95% is way too high. I think even me, I'm not overly happy with wealthy people at the moment. Partially because of who they are, but also because they're not paying their fair share. What is their fair share? I don't know, but 95% is way too much. So you could argue like 40% maybe, I don't know, 50%. It really depends on a person's outlook, but 95%, that's just kind of crazy. Anyway, that's pretty much all I wanted to say about Tax, man. There's some interesting guitar work going on there. Of course, it's a Harrison song. I'm not going to get into that too much. So let's go ahead then and move on to the next song, which is I'm Only Sleeping, which is a very interesting title, isn't it? Now, the reason it's interesting, of course, is because Mr. Barrett does many, many songs about sleeping and dreaming and traveling while sleeping, etc. So this one for me, just by the title already, is kind of suspect. It's very easy for me to note a Syd influence. I don't think I'm going to do points. Yeah, I'm not going to do points. I'm just going to note when I see things, okay? So, I don't know. I don't know if I can... Okay, I got a pen. So I'm going to just make a note here of anything that I see, and I'm going to give points. I'm going to give Syd points. So this one already has 1 point, all right? Because of the title, Sleeping and whatever else. So let's take a look at it. Now, this one is mainly attributed to Mr. Lennon. So let's look at the lyrics. If you would, pull up the lyrics on your phone. When I wake up in the morning, lift my head, I'm still yawning. Okay, morning and yawning do not rhyme. It's a very loose form of rhyme. We've seen Lennon do this before. For me, it is an accomplished state where you say, I will have, For me, as a poet, it's more interesting. It allows you to have a bit more flexibility in what you want to say. And so I kind of like it, but it is not actual rhyming. So let's keep going. In the middle of a dream, stay in bed, float upstream. Okay, so dream and stream, of course, which do rhyme. There's a little bit of alliteration in the first line, when I wake up, and then yawning. So all with a W alliteration, and then when, and there's a lot of kind of M's: morning, my, I'm, middle, dream, stream. There's quite a bit of M alliteration in the entirety of it, but it's not significant enough for me to really kind of call out as being it's spaced out enough that you kind of wonder if it isn't just kind of happenstance. So please don't wake me, don't shake me. So there is wake me, shake me, rhyme, leave me where I am, I'm only sleeping. Okay, the next line. Everybody thinks I'm lazy. Don't mind. I think they're crazy. So lazy, crazy, simple rhyme there. Running everywhere at a speed till they find there's no need. So speed and need, very simple. These are new rhyme combinations, by the way. I haven't seen lazy, crazy before, or speed and need. And I just want to point out, many people do tie Mr. Lennon's lyrics to Lewis Carroll and Through the Looking Glass, and this right here is doing a similar thing. Everyone else is running around at a real speed. This is exactly what the rabbit is doing, of course. It's always late for a date, has to run around very fast. Here is a reference to that loosely. It is a very loose reference to that same sentiment. And of course, we've discussed this in Did Syd Barrett the Wall? And we've also discussed this in Did Syd Barrett Dark Side of the Moon? Okay, let's continue on. That sentiment is right here. I mean, you can see it. Don't spoil my day, miles away. I'm only sleeping. So day and away, very simple rhyme. I'm the world going by my window. Okay, well, so I have a Syd score of 2 right now. I'm going to give it a Syd score of 3 because of the Syd Barrett reference to Sitting by the Window. Here it is, sung by the Beatles. An eye in the world going by my window, taking my time. Now, world window, taking my time. I don't see too much alliteration. There's nothing too interesting there poetically for me, other than the reference to sitting by the window. So 3, lying and staring at the ceiling, waiting for a sleepy feeling. Now there is within Subterranean, The Subterraneans by Kerouac, there's a reference to, people laying around staring at the ceiling for a long time. It's right in there in that book. So that's kind of an interesting reference. We did break down Kerouac and the Subterraneans and Syd Barrett, and I can't recall exactly what the episode was for that. Don't spoil day, miles away, very simple again. And it just kind of repeats. So a very simple song. I do like this song quite a bit. So I have a Syd score of 3, and I'm going to give it a Syd score of 4. And the reason for that is because one of the things people constantly said about Mr. Barrett was that he was kind of lazy. He would lay around and whatever else. He may have this quite in common with Mr. Lennon. I think I've known quite a few people like this. That are called lazy by other folks, but they're actually thinking. So they just kind of lay around and think about things for long periods of time. To the outside observer, it looks like they're not doing anything, but they're actually processing information and thoughts and internalizing, breaking down through an internal process what is going on and what they think about the world around them. Very interesting. So, Syd score of 4 for I'm Only Sleeping. Let's move on to the next song, which is kind of an odd one. Supposedly is a combination of songs written by Lennon and McCartney that were kind of jumbled together. Now, before I mention Donovan, supposedly Donovan contributed 2 lines to this song about the sky of blue and the sea of green. I'll discuss that here in a minute. For now, let's just look at the lyrics. If you would call up Yellow Submarine. This is a song that I've always hated. I'm going to be honest. I always hated this song because it was inanely, insipidly stupid. Like, She Loves You, Yeah, 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 and Love Me Do, which is just a terrible song. Those types of songs drove me crazy. But looking at the song now, I think there's a little bit more going on to it, to be fair. So let's take a look at Yellow Submarine, the lyrics, and we'll try and figure out what's going on. Okay, so first off, there's a color reference, right? Yellow Submarine, Mr. Barrett likes to use color as a metaphor, so I'll give it a point for that. That's 1 point. Let's look at the lyrics. Town where I was born, man sailed the sea, he told us of his life in the land of submarines. Okay. All right, I'll get into this a little bit later, but the rhyme is loose again, sea and submarines. So they sailed to the sun till they found of sea a green, and they lived beneath the waves in the yellow submarine. So green and submarine are the rhyming pair, as were sea and submarine. And then they do their we all live in a yellow submarine, submarine bit. Okay, so they're just rhyming Yellow Submarine. This is part of the reason why I didn't like this song before. I kind of like it now that I've thought about it a little bit more. And I just like it because of the potential thought of what all is going on. So let's take a look at the next bit. Their friends are all on board. Many live next door. So aboard and door are the rhymes, and the big end, and then the band begins to play. I guess. I mean, it's really simple end of line rhyme. I don't see a whole lot else going on there. Again, the chorus, live in a yellow submarine. And then the next bit is that they are living a life of ease. Every one of them has all they need. And sky blue, sea of green, a yellow submarine, ha. Okay, so far I have a score of 1. Now, this idea of a sea of green, we specifically called out, is mentioned in Jug Band Blues. So Mr. Barrett uses that in Jug Band Blues. The sea is not green. This is a James Joyce call out. It also was called out by the Rolling Stones in Painted Black. So Painted Black, which was released prior to this in May of '66, and of course later on in Jug Band Blues, which was, I don't know, December of '67, around there, Mr. Barrett used it in that song as well. And of course it's in James Joyce's book Ulysses. So we discussed that influence in our breakdown of Peeling Syd Barrett Jug Band Blues. So I just want to point out a few things here with the lyrics. And so far, I'm going to give this a Syd Barrett score of 2. And that's about it. But there are a few things in here that are quite strange. Okay? So the first is that there is a rhyme pair of green and submarine. Now, if you are familiar with Pink Floyd, you will recognize that same pair is used in the song Echoes. Everything is green and submarine. Very, very tightly packed pair, inline rhyme, used by Pink Floyd in the song Echoes. Echoes is an odd song, and in Did Syd Barrett Meddle, I broke down this song to some degree, and I want to point out something else to you. In, let's see, in Palacios' book, page 249, he specifically mentions that Syd Barrett is getting royalties for that song, Echoes. Perhaps that's part of a previous deal, I don't know. But you do have to wonder, why is Mr. Barrett getting getting royalties for Echoes when he wasn't with the band anymore, correct? So when Metal came out, that doesn't credit Mr. Barrett anywhere. I don't know. I mean, you'll have to decide on your own, but it certainly is a little bit strange. And here is that rhyming pair, and it is repeated in that song Echoes. One other thing, I guess, so I'm going to give that song a Syd score of 3, because, I don't know, it's a little bit odd to me. I guess that would be more of a Syd and Pink Floyd score of 3, but I'm going to give that a Syd score of 3. Two last things for me to discuss about the song. The first one is the many sound effects that are used. Industrial rock will kind of do this later, though they record a whole bunch of strange kind of sound effects and then use those musically. The Beatles are doing that in this song. It's kind of a precursor to what a lot of strange kind of sounds you could record and throw into pop music. The Beatles were very good at this, in my opinion, in this time frame, taking kind of avant-garde sounds and incorporating them into pop music. The other thing that I want to point out is that I never really got the metaphor of why we are all living in a yellow submarine. I don't live in a yellow submarine. Is this a representation of the Earth or something, why would, they're mentioning the sun and being in a sea of green, but we're not. The planet isn't in a sea of green. Why are we all in a yellow submarine? I do wonder if this isn't a pronoun problem, which would be a very Syd Barrett thing. We've discussed that thoroughly in Peeling Syd. By we all, do they mean me and you, or do they mean them? And do they mean their friends? Not everyone on the world, on the planet, but all of their group of friends. And if you look at it from that point of view, perhaps now it makes sense. They are part of a yellow submarine subculture. Therefore, the submarine is a representation of subculture. What is that subculture doing? Well, it's yellow. So if you are familiar with the color yellow, I guess I'll throw some of that up here from Mr. Cirlot's book. Just recognize that yellow is a color that is recognized by as being a metaphor in many cases of sacrifice, trying to improve the world, etc. So it would seem that this is saying that by being part of a yellow submarine, they're part of a subculture that's trying to make the world a better place through their own work and sacrifice, which really is kind of a wonderful sentiment, if that's what's happening here. Just going to throw that idea out there. So in that way now, it kind of makes a little bit more sense to me, and it's not as insipidly stupid as I initially thought it was when I was younger. Okay. Maybe I'm reading too much into it and it is insipidly stupid. I don't know. But it certainly is possible. The next song that I would kind of like to note is called Tomorrow Never Knows. Now this is a really strange song. Supposedly mostly written by Lennon. And we'll get into a bit of strange things in this song here in a little bit. But for now, let's just look at the lyrics. So, if you would pull up the lyrics on your phone, turn off your mind, relax, float downstream. Not dying, not dying. So, very loosely constructed. I see no alliteration. I see no rhyming, other than the repetition of dining and dying. Lay down all thoughts, surrender to the void, shining and shining. Of course, that reference to shining and shining is one that we've discussed thoroughly within Mr. Barrett. I'll come back to this here in a moment, give it a Syd score. I'll do all the Syd score here in a minute. Shining and shining repeats. You may see the meaning of within. It is being, it is being. Love is all in everyone. Knowing and knowing. Ignorance and hates may mourn the dead. Believing, believing. Listen to the color of your dreams. It is living. It is not living. It is not living. Play the game. Existence to the end of the beginning. Of the beginning. Okay, very loose. And I will say that right there is kind of a positive view on the totality of life. And the idea that there is a beginning for something new at the end of this existence. It's a nice kind of a sentiment. And I will point out this is quite religious in many ways. It's spiritual in many ways. I guess you would say it's spiritual versus religious. So although, of course, the Beatles were involved in their whole more popular than Jesus kind of thing, and many people believe that they are anti-religious, that does not mean that people are anti-spiritual necessarily, in my opinion. In fact, many people that are extremely spiritual are anti-religious in nature because they are into kind of discovering the reality of their own life, and they feel that at some point organized exterior thought or dogma begins to hinder that development. Now, whether you want to believe that or not is up to you, but there are a number of people, I will say, that do feel that way, and I think for me personally, That certainly is true in many ways. So let's look through here for some kind of Syd ideas and some discussions. The first thing I want to point out is that there apparently is the possibility that Mr. Lennon had been reading The Psychedelic Experience by Mr. Leary. And, of course, a lot of these ideas are discussed in his Psychedelic Experience. I discussed this book to a small degree in Peeling Syd Barrett. Now, there are psychedelic references obviously in here, so let's take a look at them. And I'm going to interpret some of these things loosely and keep track of Syd's score. The first thing is turning off your mind. So, of course, Mr. Leary is the one that said tune in, turn off, and drop out. So right there it is, turn off. And that is quite possibly a direct quote of an idea expressed by Mr. Leary. Relax and then float downstream. You are not dying. So, of course, this could be a reference to a psychedelic experience, the idea of the dissolving of the ego, or the dissolving of your experience of who you are, and then just floating along with wherever you're going to go. Now, I want to point out that this idea of floating downstream, of course, is used by Mr. Barrett in his song See Emily Play, so I will give a point for that. 1 point so far. Surrender to the Void and Shining and Shining. Now, that idea of things being shining and shining is expressed in Matilda Mother when the lyrics mention that reading the scribbly lines of black and it's all shining, so that's 2 points. See the meaning of what is within, this internal idea of seeing things through kind of this journey is often used by Mr. Barrett in his music. I'll give that 3 points. Love is all and love is everyone. It is knowing and knowing. Of course, Mr. Barrett often sung about not wanting any material things, but being interested in love. So that's 4 points. I don't really understand that ignorance and hates may mourn the dead. Believing, believing. The color of your dreams. There's a reference to colors again, so 5 points. And that's about it. Existence is... the game existence to the end is just the beginning of something else. So I don't know about Mr. Barrett believing in something like that. Now, these are all very common to psychedelic music, so I have a score of 5, which is, if you've been watching Peeling Syd and Did Syd, we kind of keep track of, I've kept track of scores for a number of Pink Floyd songs. That's still a pretty low song. I would expect it to be high because this is overtly psychedelic. It is overtly a psychedelic song. It is quite clear to anyone that is aware of the references that is what is happening, in my opinion. That's pretty much it. That's pretty much it for this album. And for many people, this album is really kind of a wonderful album. But for me, the next album is the one that really kind of does it. And just kind of a heads up, I'm really going to go to town on these next few songs. I don't know how long this video is going to be. When I first had the idea of putting this together, I had no idea what I was getting into. I mean, if you notice, it's been 2 weeks since I put out a video. Part of the reason is because of the content is just absolutely astonishing. But part of it, I'll get into some of the other stuff. But basically, I had no idea what I was getting into when I put this together. I thought it was going to be really, really simple, a really quick breakdown. And then I got into this and I was like, holy cow, this is really a lot of material to cover. Which I guess shouldn't be too surprising. So let's take a look at Sgt. Pepper's Lonely Hearts Club Band. And if you would, I guess go ahead and pull that up. Now this, of course, is one that we noted was being recorded at Abbey Road the same time that Pink Floyd and Syd Barrett were recording Piper at the Gates of Dawn. There's about a 3-month overlap. Before our previous episode, we discussed that NUJV or NUVJ semaphore on the cover of Help, which is kind of a strange thing to be going on. And we mentioned that there could be new unknown vocalist or visionary joins or something like that. That's one of the first kind of strange bits about the Beatles that a lot of people, and there are some kind of conspiracy theories about some things that are going on, including, and of course I included one of videos about breaking down the Paul is dead conspiracy theory and how that ties in with one of the albums. I won't discuss that too much yet because that's in a follow-up album. I just want to point out that here again now is Sgt. Pepper Lonely Hearts Club Band. It's a very strange collection of words, and I'll point out that these initials could be representing something. I'll just kind of point that out. Now, we just discussed in Yellow Submarine that what maybe be discussed by We All Live in a Submarine is that it could be referencing a subculture or a subgroup. So this may be referencing a subgroup. So each one of those SPLHCB, which in my opinion could also be SGTPLHCB, could be representing people or groups of people, and there, and some of them are pretty, I guess you could say, interesting. So if now the kind of the ringleader for this whole album is really considered by most people to be Mr. McCartney. So if there is a Sgt. Pepper and a Billy Shears, and Billy Shears is kind of an alter ego that's discussed, then you would have to expect that is Mr. McCartney, because that's basically referencing Mr. McCartney. Now, so are there other possible names in this initialism? Well, there's an S, so that could be Ringo Starr. There's an H, that could be George Harrison. And there is an L, so that could be John Lennon. There are other people's names possibly that are being referenced in here. I don't know who they could be. I mean, you can kind of try and figure that out on your own, I guess. But I want to point out something else. I do wonder sometimes if there isn't a reference to a whole bunch of different bands in this initialism. So if I go through these now and I call out most of the really important bands of the period, of course the last one is a B, so that could be the Beatles, and the last will be the first, and the first will be the last. So there's a B. There's a P. It could be Pink Floyd. Could it not? Pretty much any major band at that time frame you can kind of point to. Cream. There's a C. If one of the there's an H, could be referencing the Hendrix experience. Isn't that interesting? The Stones. So S for the Stones. And pretty much all these bands, and an L, so Led Zeppelin. All the major bands of this time frame that we know had some forms of connections, you can kind of point to this. And if you believe that Sargent could be SGT, then you have a G for Genesis, which was one of the underground bands at that time as well. So I don't know, coincidence, maybe I'm reading too much into the possibilities of it, but it could be a reference to all these bands kind of working together, and we know that to some degree they did work together. The Rolling Stones had quite a collection of sound, quite a sound crew that they allowed Led Zeppelin to use for recording Led Zeppelin 4. We referenced that Norman Smith and George Martin both knew each other from working on the Beatles. So there's a producer that was working with the Beatles that's working with Pink Floyd. So there certainly is some kind of intermingling going on. I don't know, maybe that's what this is about. Maybe that's what this stands for. At any rate, let's just look at the song. Let's look at the song, and we'll try to tear down some of the lyrics here. Okay? It starts off with 20 years ago today, Sgt. Pepper told the band to play. So there's today in play. Going in and out of style, guaranteed to raise a smile. So end of line rhyme, today, play, style, smile. Very simple word combinations. May I introduce to you, like you've known all these years, Sgt. Pepper's Lonely Hearts Club Band. Okay. So here again is kind of this, I guess, this idea of Paul McCartney being kind of this ringleader of a secondary band. I'll get into some of the story behind this here in a moment, but let's just continue on with the lyrics. Says that they're the Lonely Hearts Club Band. Hope you'll enjoy the show. Sit back and let the evening go. So show and go. Very, very simple. Lonely Hearts Club Band. Wonderful to be here. A thrill. Such a lovely audience. Home with us. I'd love to take you home. Don't want to stop the show. Might like to know. Sing a song, sing along, I guess. So let me introduce to you one and only Billy Shears, Sgt. Pepper's Lonely Hearts Club Band. Okay, so very, very simple. Nothing too much going on other than what is being relayed in the ideas. So first off, this idea of having kind of a secondary band, there's a whole Paul is Dead conspiracy that some people point to, specifically the character Billy Shears as being a replacement for Paul. I won't get into that too much. I won't say that I believe it or I disbelieve it. I honestly haven't looked at it that much, other than a video or something. But for me, it's questionable. Now, the idea that a company would want to amplify that theory to sell more records, that to me is not a conspiracy theory. That's simply a conspiracy. So whether or not Paul is dead, the idea that people would take advantage of that to sell records certainly is possible. And we'll get into that later. And right here is kind of one portion of that. Now, I do have some friends that believe in the Paul is dead theory, and I won't say that I think they're right or wrong. One of the things I will say is that the Billy Shears name is very suspect, and the reason for that is because it's very close to BS. Look at the initials, BS, and it even sounds like Bill Shears. So in the U.S., I don't know if that's a common parlance in the U.K. and in England, if Bill Shears or bullshit is kind of something that's in common parlance there, but certainly in the U.S., when I hear Bill Shears, I hear something else. And what I hear is something that is telling me, not really buying it. So maybe that's on purpose. I don't know. Maybe that's kind of included in there. So another thing that's interesting, of course, is that Mr. David Bowie would do something very similar to this when he invented Ziggy Stardust, which is invent kind of an alter ego to get into a new frame of mind, to prepare new kind of ways of looking at music. Perhaps that's what the Beatles are doing here. Perhaps this is an indication also that the Beatles kind of were not already getting along very well, in my opinion, or perhaps not working well as a group. They felt the need to reinvent themselves in a way. I don't know. Other than that, other than the song The Octopus, which has kind of a carnival barker aspect to it, which this does seem to have, I don't see very much Syd Barrett in the song. So for the idea of this just kind of being a show and kind of having a carnival barker, this will be kind of important later. I'll give this a score of 1. You could argue that it's higher if you believe that the initials actually represent something. We've noted Mr. Barrett may be doing something like that. So perhaps that's going on, and perhaps that is not. Now, one of the things that's kind of going on here that I think we should note is that this song was not a song that the Beatles played live, ever, as a band. They did play it together with Clapton a little later, or a number of the members did. Now, I just want to point out that Jimi Hendrix played this song 3 days after the album was released, and I've included that link in the description. Now, you have to ask yourself, I've heard an interview where someone says 3 days after the album was released, Jimmy came out on stage and played this song like he wrote it. Interesting, isn't it? Jimmy played this song like he wrote it. Well, I mean, one of the greatest, in my opinion, the greatest rock guitarist of all time, Jimi Hendrix. Yeah, I mean, of course, he can kind of throw things together. But I don't know. I mean, you decide. Why wouldn't they play it live? And why is Hendrix coming out and playing it live? Perhaps, he's just kind of giving a salute to the guys. Perhaps there's something more going on there. Sometimes there's a lot of truth in people's succinct notes on things. So there is a part of me that wonders, I mean, is this something that is just difficult to play on guitar that made it difficult to play live? And so you've got someone like Hendrix that can play it live. Did he have something to do with this song? I don't know. You'll have to decide that on your own. So let's continue on then to the next song of note. And so, anyway, Sgt. Pepper Lonely Hearts Club Band. I get a Syd score of 1, which is incredibly low. Let's go ahead and try the next song, which is Lucy in the Sky with Diamonds, which is one of the most famous Beatles songs. And we'll kind of tear that apart lyrically first, and then we'll come back. And then we'll come back and discuss it. There's a lot to discuss here with this song. A lot. Okay? So, let's take a look at the lyrics. If you would, call them up on your phone. Lucy in the Sky with Diamonds. So, let's start off here. First off, now, just in the title, it's already suspect to me, because it has Lucy in the title. And we know that Mr. Barrett has used Lucy before. But, supposedly, this is mostly written by Lennon. It is a reference to a drawing that was made by his son from school. That's the story. That's the pop story. That's what's generally accepted to be the source of this song. So let's take a look at it. It starts off with picture yourself in a boat on a river. Tangerine trees and marmalade skies. Okay. Right there, I don't get it. Do you? I don't get why Donovan has to give them the line sky of blue and seas of green. John Lennon supposedly wrote this song. Look at the descriptors he's using. Tangerine trees and marmalade skies. What a wonderful line. So I'm supposed to believe that the Beatles and John Lennon, poetically, couldn't do better in Yellow Submarine than Sky of Blue and Sea of Green. And they needed Donovan's help? And he's writing this? This is amazing. And just break it down, all right? Tangerine trees. So there's the T and the R alliteration, and marmalade skies. Now, at first, marmalade doesn't really seem to fit, other than the rhythm 1 2 3 1 and 1 2 3 1. We have seen this rhythm in Echoes. It is the same rhythm, that 1 2 3 1 1 2 3 1. Also notice that tangerine and marmalade are related because you can make marmalade out of tangerines. So tangerine trees and marmalade skies. What a wonderful line. And I'm supposed to believe that someone can't do better than the sky is blue and the sea is green. I don't know. I mean, up to you. You decide. But the story just doesn't really make a whole lot of sense to me. Somebody here is really, really talented with words. And you would think that would be consistent. So at any rate, let's continue on. Someone calls you. You answer quite slowly. A girl with kaleidoscope eyes. What a wonderful kind of idea. Again, this kaleidoscope eyes idea is all within the Subterraneans by Jack Kerouac. This kind of wide eyes that see all these different colors. Okay, let's look at the next bit. Cellophane flowers of yellow and green. It's beautiful. I don't know what to tell you. It has the F and the L alliteration. Cellophane flowers of yellow. Man, that's really a wonderful word combination, isn't it? Towering over your head. Notice the R alliteration there. Towering over your head. Look for the girl with the sun in her eyes, and she's gone. I don't see too much alliteration in there. Lucy in the Sky with Diamonds. It's similar sounds to Jimi Hendrix. Excuse me while I kiss the sky. The S and the K kind of idea. So Lucy in the Sky. Excuse me while I kiss the sky. Interesting. I don't know what's going on there. It's just a random thought that just occurred to me right now, so I'm throwing it in there. Okay, so let's continue on. follow her down to a bridge by a fountain. Follow her down to a bridge by a fountain. Follow fountain. Rocking horse people eat marshmallow pies. Okay, rocking horse people. I'll come back to that one. Okay. At any rate, I'm just gonna make a note of this. Right now I have a SID score of 2. I'll come back to the reason why here in just a minute. Actually I have a SID score of 3 so far. So there's the eyes, there's the 1, 2, 3 word rhythm, and then right here is rocking horse people. And I'll come back to the rocking horse people here in a moment. Everyone smiles as you drift past the flowers. It grows so incredibly high. Going high. Very similar to Syd Barrett, so I'll give another point, so I'm at 4. Newspaper taxis appear on the shore. What a strange line. Newspaper taxis appear on the shore. Well, there's a P alliteration definitely happening there. Waiting to take you away. Climb in the back with your head in the clouds and you're gone. So this idea of being in the clouds, very similar to the song Flaming by Mr. Barrett. I'll give another point. So I'm at 5. And then Lucy in the Sky with Diamonds repeats. The next verse, picture yourself on a train in a station. So there's a train reference. I'll give a point for that. Picture yourself on a train in a station. Plasticine porters with looking glass ties. I don't know what plasticine is, but there's definitely P alliteration happening there. Plasticine porters, P-T. Suddenly, someone is at the turnstile. It's the girl with kaleidoscope eyes. Well, what a wonderful rhythm. Really, really odd, wonderful rhythm. I'm going to give it a point just for that. Again, I'm at 7. Okay, so allow me now to go back and explain to you. Maybe I should have done it. The rocking horse people. There are 2 references, of course, to rocking horse people that are made in other songs that I'm aware of. One of them was in the song Deborah by Mark Bolan. He also mentions riding a stallion, and also is mentioned by Syd in No Good Trying. Now, I believe those were both after this song was made. Perhaps the Bolan Deborah song may have been made before this song, but I'm not certain, so I won't say for sure. Okay, so let's get into some of the ideas behind this. And first off, I just want to note that this feels very much like a Lewis Carroll kind of a song, which makes sense for Mr. Lennon. We already noted the possible reference to Lewis Carroll. So let's, and we'll see that more so here in a moment with Am the Walrus, but certainly it seems to kind of be happening here. Now, one of the things I mentioned is the Lucy reference. Now, of course, Mr. Barrett had already written a song called Lucy Leave. So that actually was put out in 65. So it actually precedes this song. He also did Lucifer Sam, which was happening at the same times. And of course, Lucifer and Lucy are derivatives of one another. Or Lucy is a derivative or female form of Lucifer. So, I don't know. I'm going to give another point. So I'm at 8. Let's take a look at... there also is another song that references Lucy in the Sky that's made by Pink Floyd, and that's in Let There Be More Light. It specifically mentions Lucy in the Sky with glowing robes, something along those lines. So that also follows this song. That's in June of 68. So that's an influence on Pink Floyd to some degree. Now McCartney is quoted, and I'll kind of throw this up here, that Lucy, for him, I guess in his opinion, was a reference to God or the White Rabbit. What a strange thing to say. Is that strange? It's strange to me. Why would God be a white rabbit? I don't know. I mean, there's there's a song about White Rabbit. There's a White Rabbit in Lewis Carroll. But of course, in Syd Barrett, did Syd Barrett Dark Side of the Moon, etc., we reference the fact that rabbit phonetically is possible to be rearranged to form the name Barrett. So rabbit makes me think of Barrett. Such a strange thing. At any rate, this song does change key and time. It uses varispeed, and this will be important later in reference to someone else's video. But I do want to point out that this also is using variations in key and in timing, and is also using varispeed to kind of slow things down and speed things up and change the sounds of people's voices. And the changes in time is referenced quite frequently in Mr. Barrett's music. I'm going to give another point for that. Quite specifically, in the clock they threw in a washing machine. So I'm going to give that another point. I'm at 9 points now for this song. I possibly could go into this a little bit more, but you can see there's so many connections between this song and a number of psychedelic songs made not only by Syd Barrett but also by Pink Floyd. It's quite interesting to me. Whether that's completely coincidental or not, you'll have to kind of decide. You'll have to decide that on your own. So let's continue on then. That's pretty much my ideas for Lucy in the Sky. Now I'm sure I'm missing a whole bunch of stuff here. Again, I'm not an expert on all these things. I'm digging up whatever information I can understand and then presenting it to you. Okay, so let's continue on then. The next song that I would like to discuss is called She's Leaving Home, mostly put together supposedly by Mr. McCartney. Now this is a song that that the Renewed Poet suggested I take a look at, so I'm taking a look at it. For me, the song sounds very Beatles-y. Let's call it that. But let's go ahead then and take a look at this song. I don't totally understand why Renewed Poet is so interested in this song, but I believe it has something to do with Paul. So I do know that Paul mostly contributed to this song. So let's take a look just at the lyrics, if you would call them up on your phone. It starts off saying, it's Wednesday morning, 5 o'clock, silently closing her bedroom door, leaving a note she hoped would say more, so door and more. Downstairs to the kitchen, clutching her handkerchief. That's pretty good right there. Kitchen, clutching her handkerchief. Notice all the CH alliteration that's happening there. Kitchen, clutching, and the hard K sound. So K and CH. Quietly turning the back door key. Stepping outside, she is free. So key and free. We gave her most of our lives, is leaving, sacrificed most of our lives and lives, home. She is leaving home. We gave her everything money could buy. So lives and buy. She's leaving home after living alone for so many years. Bye-bye. Okay. Father snores, wife into her dressing gown. She picks up the letter that's laying there, standing alone at the top of the stairs. So there and stairs, she breaks down and cries. Our baby's gone. Why would she treat us so thoughtlessly? How could she do this to me? So a song about a girl that's leaving home and is just left with and left a note. The next portion is the chorus. It repeats, and then Friday morning, 9 o'clock, she's far away. She's making an appointment, meeting a man from the motor trade. So away, made, and trade. Very simple rhymes, long A. Leaving home, bye-bye. So I don't really notice anything overtly Syd there, other than, no, nothing really. So I'm not really sure what to make of this song. If you would give comments, if you know what, and Poet, if you would throw in your comments kind of here why you think this song might be an important one. Now, I'll give you a little bit of background about this song. It's about supposedly about an article that Mr. McCartney read about a young lady named Melanie, and I won't go into it too much. It's very easy for you to find this information out if you'd like. Basically, she ran away from home, and there was an article that Mr. McCartney may have read. The harmony here is significant. It sounds very Beatles or Beachel Boys, whatever you want to call it. It sounds like the Beach Boys to me. Quite orchestral, and it also it uses a very speed variation within the song. Now, supposedly McCartney played this song for Brian Wilson, and he cried and said it was beautiful. So, I mean, this was in April of '67. So, why is McCartney hanging out with Brian Wilson of the Beach Boys? Why is he playing this specific song? Why does this song sound so Beach Boy-y? It sounds very much like the Beach Boys. So, I mean, I have a lot of questions. It's very strange, you know? What's going on? What is the story behind this song? And who all influenced this song and put it together? Now, at this point in time, of course, the Beatles were very famous already. They knew many, many people. So, who all were they working with? I have no idea. But, man, it's just kind of a weird song. It indicates to me an entire life that is so different from anything else. And it sounds so unbeatly. It sounds so extremely like the Beach Boys. Perhaps on purpose. I don't know. It's just kind of an odd song. The authorship of it, to me, is just kind of out there. Now, there is a story about Miss Melanie, and for me, perhaps that could be a reference to something like the difficulty that's expressed in the painting Little Red Rooster, which I have come back to again and again. But there is kind of a backstory to the Melanie story. You can read it on your own. I'm not going to get into it. That's personal for that person, so I don't want to discuss it too much. I'll just leave it alone. But the idea of parents that kind of, and for the person that this was written about, who actually apparently did know Paul to some degree, or at least he had judged her and helped to get her an award for some kind of a competition. I don't know. It's weird. You know, it's just kind of weird. So, let's go ahead and move on to A Day in the Life, which is, for many people, the most important song off of this album. I'm just going to look at the lyrics first. This is extremely complicated, so please be patient with me. Oh, by the way, for the last song, I have a Syd score of 1 because of the possible story reference with the Melanie that's referenced in her history, which may be similar to something that happened to Mr. Barrett. And I won't get into that too much, other than I'll say that it may be tied up in the painting Little Red Rooster. So, I'll give 1 point for that. Now, A Day in the Life. What a strange song. Let's do it. A strangely wonderful and beautiful song. Now, if there is a song that makes me think like, well, I like this band, perhaps this would be it for me. Perhaps this would be the song along together with Hide Your Love Away and I don't know, All You Need Is Love and I Am the Walrus. This is one of my favorite Beatles songs. That's what I'm trying to say. So let's take a look at it. Read the news today. Oh boy, lucky man who made the grade. The news was rather sad, had to laugh. So there's a very loose rhyme there at the end, sad and laugh. I don't see anything else poetically going on. It's just kind of telling a story. I saw the photograph. The next mention is that he blew his mind out in a car. Didn't notice the lights had changed. A crowd of people stood and stared. They'd seen his face before. No one was really sure if he was from the House of Lords. So there, finally, before and Lords is a near rhyme. This is all very loose, very John Lennon-esque. Also, by the way, very Syd Barrett-esque, but whatever. Uh, it continues on. Saw a film today. Oh boy, the English army had just won the war. People turned away. I had to look, having read the book. What book could be read? I have no idea. But look and book, very simple rhyme. Again, very open format. I'd love to turn you on is the refrain. Again, a very likely psychedelic reference. There's an alarm clock. And then supposedly now this portion is the part of the song that was written by McCartney. So most of this is by Mr. Lennon. But most of this, I believe, is most of this bridge portion here was put together by Mr. McCartney. That's the common history of the song. So woke up and fell out of bed. Dragged a comb across my head, so bed and head. Found my way downstairs and drank a cup. I'm assuming this is coffee. Looking up, I noticed I was late. Found my coat and grabbed my hat. Made the bus in seconds flat. So hat and flat. There's a rhyme. Had a smoke and somebody spoke. Ooh, interesting rhythm there. Found my way upstairs and had a smoke and somebody spoke. And I went into a dream. That's an interesting line right there. That's a fun line. Found my way upstairs and had a smoke and somebody spoke. And I went into a dream because of the odd rhythm of it. So I'm just going to give 1 point for that. Right there. So I'm at 1. So far, Syd Barrett score 1. I'll find some more here in a bit, but for now, let's just focus just on the lyrics. Read the news today, oh boy. 4,000 holes in Blackburn, Lancashire. I'm not familiar with these places. I'm not from England. And though the holes were rather small, had to count them all, so small and all. Now they know how many holes it takes to fill the Albert Hall. Okay, sure. Love to turn you on, and that's pretty much it. And then it ends with this instrumental kind of clatter, this kind of cacophony that's rising, and then specifically stops on a chord. Now, I've heard this rising noise that suddenly stops and ends with kind of a little bit of things going on. And it's in jug band blues. So there's a kind of a beginning to jug band blues, and then there's a whole bunch of noise that's kind of going on, that's kind of rising crescendo, and then it stops, and then you just have Syd playing guitar alone. So I'll give a point for that. And of course now, jug band blues and this other stuff is kind of all happening at the same time. So that's 2 points now for Day in the Life. Now let's get into the story of some of the things that are happening in this song. It's incredibly interesting and strange. The first thing that I want to note is that supposedly this is about a Mr. Tara Brown. And he was I guess you could say an heir to the Guinness beer. And he died. He died in a car crash. So he is someone that knew John Lennon and Paul McCartney. He was part of the cultural underground to some degree. How far, how much so, I don't know. And that's about all I'm going to get into with that. So supposedly John Lennon had read the news about this man dying in a car crash, and that was kind of where this song came from. So let's take a look and see if this kind of makes sense. So at the beginning of the song, you heard the news today. The news was rather sad. I had to laugh. I saw the photograph. All right. This lucky man that made the grade, and the news was rather sad. Well, I had to laugh. I saw the photograph. I don't know. I don't know what photograph is being referenced there. The feel of this, in my opinion, is very much like the song Paint It Black. You don't know if it's positive or negative. And I did Syd Barrett, A Painting Black. And you can Peeling Syd, A Painting Black. And I discuss the plus or minus or the positive and negative aspect of that song. And it is here in this song as well now. That kind of torn between positive and negative is something that Mr. Barrett is kind of, in my opinion, kind of known for. But this immediate section feels like a separate section from the second portion, and I'll explain why. Read the news, lucky man made the grade, the news was sad, had to laugh, I saw the photograph. Stop. Now the reason for this is because the next verse, which discusses I saw a film today, oh boy, it is 5 lines long. So this actually to me looks like a verse and then a verse and then another verse. Okay? So this would be the stop of the first verse. It is the end of an idea. The next verse would be he blew his mind out in a car. Now, to me, that doesn't necessarily reflect the first verse. This could be an entirely different person now. And the reason for that is, of course, because Mr. Tara Brown died in a car crash. He didn't blow his mind out in a car. He died in a car crash. So, and I won't even get into the idea necessarily that blowing out your mind is not the same thing as blowing out your brains, at least not in the United States. Blowing out your mind traditionally is something that is not physical. It is beyond the organic physicality of the brain. The mind is very much like the soul or the spirit. It is something beyond the direct organic nature of the brain. Why is this important? Well, because Mr. Barrett later uses this same idea when he says that our minds are shot together in the song It Is Obvious. He uses the same idea of a mind being shot or a mind being blown. This is why you say your mind is blown. So now it kind of makes sense. He blew his mind out in a car and he didn't notice that the light had changed. So people are standing around and staring, and they'd seen his face before. They weren't sure if he was from the House of Lords. So yes, obviously this could all be a reference to the idea of running a red light or something like that and being in a car crash. I just want to point out that it is possible that this could be a different person and a different story now. That someone actually has had an experience inside of a car and they're just sitting at a red light. And people are sitting around and staring at this person. And they have seen his face before, but they didn't know who he was. So who could that be? Well, if this is a direct observation, it couldn't be John Lennon. Because everybody knows what John Lennon looks like. So it would have to be somebody that was kind of unknown at the time. Mr. Barrett was kind of unknown at the time. Already, he kind of was fading away. So even fans of the band, a lot of times, because he would hide behind light shows, didn't know what he looked like. So, I don't know. That appears to possibly be 2 separate stories to me, and I do wonder. Now, this idea of being a lucky man, making a grade, of course, could be, if the first verse is separate, it could be a reference to making the grade in some way as a man. How do you make the grade as a man? I don't know. That varies, but for some folks that would involve getting married. So does that kind of make sense? Is it possible that this is similar to an idea that we've discussed in Peeling Syd Barrett, Paint It Black? The idea of someone else getting married and then observing that from a distance. I don't know, you'll have to decide that on your own, but I will give 1 point for that as a possible Syd Barrett reference. Let's continue on. This idea then that the English army had just won the war is very strange. Of course, in the film The Wall, there is a portion of the film that's devoted to this very topic, the English army in World War II. So I'll give another point. That's 3. that would be more of a Pink Floyd thing than a Syd Barrett thing. But supposedly, the standard history is that Mr. Lennon was off filming a movie for Mr. Lester, and that is called How I Won the War, and he came back and was working on the song, and so that all kind of goes together with this. So let's continue on. Love to Turn You On, obviously, is a psychedelic reference, so that's one more point as a psychedelic reference, so I'm at 3. The McCartney portion, I don't see too many potential Barrett references in it. Now, this last thing that I want to discuss is kind of this idea of 4,000 holes in Blackburn, Lancashire. The holes are rather small. They're in Albert Hall. Now, this is funny because it reminds me very much of a story of Pink Floyd in Queen Elizabeth Hall. They actually were banned forever. Because they had a bubble machine at a concert that they gave in Queen Elizabeth Hall in May of '67. And bubbles are, of course, very similar to holes. Now, supposedly the pop story is there was some kind of an article about how many holes there were in the road or something like that, that Mr. Lennon also read, and that's where this came from. I just want to point out that bubbles are kind of holes, and they were in Queen Elizabeth Hall. Now, supposedly they also were banned from Albert Hall. But I don't know if it's for the same reason or exactly what that is. If you know, can you throw in the comments here what all is going on? I don't know if it's a similar rationale for why they would be banned from Albert Hall. Of course, all of these bannings were eventually dropped when Pink Floyd became extremely popular as a pop band. But for a while, they were in quite a bit of trouble because the bubble machine and the bubbles had damaged a bunch of furniture in Queen Elizabeth Hall. And I guess, so I'll give one more point for that. That's kind of a weird one. That makes me think of Pink Floyd and Syd Barrett. If the holes there in the hall, now notice they're not talking about holes in a road. They're talking about how many holes there are in Albert Hall, which makes me think of bubbles with Pink Floyd. Perhaps I'm reaching on that. I don't know. You decide. So I end up with a score here of 4. And that's pretty much it. That's pretty much it for that album, Sgt. Pepper's Lonely Hearts Club Band. And I think there are quite a few opportunities for cross-fertilization and cross-work in those bands on that album. So you'll have to kind of decide on your own. Now, the last album that I want to discuss in this episode is the Magical Mystery Tour. And there are some items of note to discuss for Magical Mystery Tour that are, I guess you could say, worth noting, or at least quite interesting. So, now one thing I do want to note real quick is that in November of '67, this album was released. Again, you have George Martin producing in Abbey Road. And the main difference is that Mr. Epstein had died. He died 17 August of '67, and if you don't know who Brian Epstein was, he was kind of he was the guy in charge of all the business kind of stuff for the Beatles. He had a lot of connections with the musical underground. We've discussed that to some degree. He knew quite a few folks, and I won't go into that too much. We've discussed that to some degree on earlier episodes, like Did Syd Wish You Were Here? And Did Syd Dark Side of the Moon? And of course, there is a meeting that is referenced by Iggy the Eskimo when she, I guess, had met Clapton and had gone to visit Brian Epstein and had met some other folks there. So that's kind of wild to me to think, these people all kind of knew each other, but I guess it shouldn't be too surprising. So let's go ahead then, and we'll break down some of the songs from Magical Mystery Tour. The first one I want to look at is The Fool on the Hill. A deceptively simple song, and it certainly is one that could be easily overlooked as not meaning a whole lot, in the same way that a fool can be overlooked as someone who doesn't know a whole lot, but sometimes knows a lot more than they're kind of letting on. Now, I'll give a Syd point for this one right away because it mentions a fool on a hill. I'll give 2 points. I'll explain why now. Of course, Mr. Barrett later would release an album called Madcap Laughs. Now, that was someone else's perception. That was, I believe, Mr. Gilmore came up with that title. So his idea of Mr. Barrett kind of being this madcap, and attach that to the title. Here is a reference to a fool being on a hill. There are many references to hills, climbing hills, that are tied with not only Syd Barrett but also Pink Floyd. So I'll give that 2 points. So let's look at the lyrics for Fool on the Hill, mainly attributed to Paul McCartney. Day after day, alone on a hill. Okay, right away. That day after day thing is very suspicious. I'll get into why later. Right now, let's just focus on the actual lyrics. And if you're a Pink Floyd fan, you should right away recognize that day after day. Okay? Alone on a hill, a man with a foolish grin is keeping perfectly still. Hill and still, nobody wants to know him. They can see he's a fool. And he never gives an answer, so he doesn't talk. I'm going to give a point right now, again, for that, because someone being alone that doesn't talk could very easily be a reference to Mr. Barrett. And nobody wanting to know him. This certainly couldn't be a reference to Mr. McCartney, could it? Everyone wanted to know Mr. McCartney. Everyone wanted to talk with him, and nobody thought he was a fool. Okay, so the fool's on the hill. He sees the sun going down, and sees the world spinning round. So we have down and round, very simple rhyme. While on the way, head in a cloud. Here again is a reference to having your head in the clouds. Very similar to the idea presented in Flaming. So I'll give another point. That's 4 points. Now, the next portion mentions that there's a man of 1,000 voices, and he's talking perfectly loud, but nobody ever hears him. So that is very strange, of course, because you can't have 1,000 voices, of course, unless you're writing for other people and they are singing or speaking your words. In that case, that would seem to be a reference to someone that is a writer, and that would then make sense. How can you talk loudly but nobody ever hears you or the sound that you are making, and they don't notice you? It could just be nonsense, but one of the ways that can happen, of course, is if a person is speaking, but they're using other people's voices to do their speaking for them. The fool sees the sun going down. Okay, so sun going down should make you think again of a Pink Floyd lyric, but we'll continue on real quick. See the world spinning round. Nobody seems to like him. And then the last original portion is, he doesn't listen to them. He knows they're the fools. They don't like him. Well, I don't know. I mean, Mr. Barrett was kind of famous for not listening to people. So I'll give one more point. I'm at 5 points. A very simple idea, okay, but the backstory may contain quite a bit more. So there's a lot going on kind of on here. There is a reference to McCartney and someone else meeting a strange person on a walk during the writing of this. Now, there is someone I know likes to go on walks, and that is Mr. Barrett. So I don't know, who is this strange person that was met on a walk? You'll have to decide. I'll kind of give you the information here. Now, there are numerous kind of stories. This song is attributed to Mr. McCartney. It is kind of assumed that he's discussing the Maharishi Yogi. It also is referenced by him that he is kind of discussing the Dutch collective called The Fool. So my question is, make up your mind. Who's it about? Is it just about some non-general entity, or I mean, is it about the yogi, or is it about this collective? He wrote the song. Who's it about? That lack of concise narrative is strange to me. I don't like it. Mr. McCartney did go film kind of a short film in France alone, in Nice, France. The film didn't do very well associated with this, but the music did do well. Now, this is kind of McCartney's first step out into doing film on his own. Unfortunate, perhaps it didn't do too well, but the album did do very well. Okay, so let's look back now at some of the lyrics. The first is the day after day. Of course, that is the same as Pink Floyd's Day After Day, Love Turns Gray, which is stated on one of my turns, The Wall. Also, this idea of the world spinning round and round is similar to the song that John Lennon did about the wheels spinning round. I'm just sitting here watching the wheels go round and round. But also is used by Mr. Barrett. We discussed this in Did Syd Barrett, Dark Side of the Moon, Dark Side of Oz. This idea of clocks in a washing machine being related to wheels turning, and also this idea of sun going down. That specifically is called out in Two Suns in the Sunset. So, it's just, I'm going to give 2 more points for those 2 things there. So I end up with a score of 7 so far. Is there anything else going on? Well, there is. There is a line, he never shows his feelings. So that's another line. John Lennon was extremely emotional. He could be extremely angry. And he could also be quite loving, you would have to assume. McCartney is known for devotional love. So who isn't showing his feelings? Well, the fool. But obviously the fool. Then this is not a character trait that relates to either of those gentlemen. It relates more succinctly to Mr. Barrett, doesn't it? He is someone that people constantly say wouldn't talk and didn't show his feelings. So I end up with a score of 8. For me, the fool on the hill could very easily be a reference to someone like Mr. Barrett. And I don't know. I mean, you'll kind of have to decide on your own. Now, it also, the line sees the sun going down. It's very, very similar to the idea presented in Dark Side of the Moon. Dig that hole, forget the sun. That's the lyric. Leaving the sun. We've discussed how all of that could reference the sun or the spotlight, the sunshine, the good life, the blessed life. Leaving that life. Who left that life? Certainly not McCartney and certainly not Lennon. They stayed in that sunshine. They stayed in the material happiness of the world. They stayed in the spotlight of the world. Mr. Barrett did not. So who is seeing the sun going down? What is that a reference to? Is that a general statement about the nature of the world? I don't know. You'll have to decide. I'll give 1 more point. So I end up with a score of 9, which is pretty high for later material. 9 correlations I can draw in this song to Mr. Barrett. I Am the Walrus, which is primarily attributed to Lennon and specifically relates to a number of stories, a nursery rhyme, and Lewis Carroll. Okay, so Lewis Carroll, Through the Looking Glass, and the specific kind of poem about the carpenter and the walrus. If you want to check those out, you can. I'm not going to discuss them too much. So let's take a look then at just the lyrics for I Am the Walrus. And we'll see what we can see. Just the lyrics. I'll get back into making correlations here in a bit. This is a pretty long one. So it starts off with I am he, you are me, we are all together. Very similar to the song Come Together, isn't it? Come together. As we are all together. See how they run like pigs from a gun. See how they fly. I'm crying. So run and gun. He, me. Interesting rhythm. Pretty fun rhythm. in my opinion. Now, there are already two things here that make me think of Pink Floyd and Syd Barrett, potentially. And if you're a Pink Floyd fan, you should also be seeing them. But I'll come back to them later. Sitting on a cornflake, waiting for the van to come. Corporation T-shirt. Stupid Bloody Tuesday. Man, you've been a naughty boy. You let your face grow long. Been a naughty boy. Let your face grow long. Okay, so... Wow. I'll just point out that having a long face often means that someone has gotten sad. So why have you been naughty? Because you have allowed yourself to show that you are sad. Interesting sentiment. But so far, a strange connection of sounds and words, something that poetically and even thematically is very difficult to discern. And wonderfully done, by the way. I enjoy it. As I mentioned, this is one of my favorite Beatles songs. Okay, I am the Eggman. They are the Eggman. I am the Walrus. Goo 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 goo. So, who or what is the Eggman? We'll discuss here in a moment. Or what could it be? Mr. City, policeman sitting pretty. Sitting pretty. Mr. City, sitting pretty. Quite a bit of alliteration there in that idea. Mr. City, sitting pretty policeman. The P and the TY and the S alliteration is significant. Little policemen in a row. See how they fly like Lucy in the sky? See how they run. Why are they running? I don't know. Of course, the previous mention to running was made as... regarding pigs, and of course one of the slang terms for cops has historically been pigs. So see how they run. The previous reference to running was see how they run like pigs from a gun. So I don't know. You have to decide that. Yellow matter custard dripping from a dead dog's eye. So significant D alliteration there. This portion is related to a nursery rhyme. I'll get into that a little bit later on. Crabbe-locker fishwife. Pornographic priestess. So 1, 2, 3, 1, 2. 1, 2, 3, 1, 2. Boy, you've been a naughty girl. You let your knickers down. Okay, so two songs were banned from BBC. One initially. One was a day in the life, or the line about turn you on. This one was banned because of this specific line. Boy, you've been a naughty girl. You let your knickers down. That should also make Pink Floyd fans kind of go, oh, interesting. But I'll get back into that here in just a minute. They do the chorus again, I am the Eggman, and then sitting in an English garden, waiting for the sun. Sun don't come, you get a tan standing in the English rain. So sun and come do kind of rhyme. It's a loose rhyme. A tan standing in the English rain. Doesn't make sense really. Expert, then the chorus again, and then expert, texpert, choking smokers. Don't you think the Joker? So choking, smoker, Joker, alliteration there. Along with the expert, texpert. Joker laughs at you. Who is the Joker? Well, that's another reference potentially to the Fool. So we have another Fool/Joker reference. And I do want to point out something significant here, which is that the Fool on the Hill and the Joker, we've discussed this thoroughly as a potential tarot reference within Mr. Barrett's music. Tarot and... it's pretty consistent. So it's consistent with the symbolism associated with that. So here it is again. Who is the Joker? Who is the madcap? Who is the Fool on the Hill? I don't know. In American music, the Joker usually references Bob Dylan. So who is the English Bob Dylan? I would argue that it's quite likely Mr. Barrett. So perhaps that's a reference. Now this person obviously is saying, I am the Eggman. So they can't be the Joker. That's someone else. There are pigs in a sty. See how they're snide. I'm crying. Semolina Pritchard's. Now, my understanding is that that may be a political reference. Climbing up the Eiffel Tower. Elementary Penguin. Singing Hare Krishna. You should have seen them kicking Edgar Allan Poe. Okay, so, man, there's a lot going on here, but let's try and decipher what we can decipher, okay? So, the first part is, that I would like to mention, is that supposedly this was somewhat inspired by A Wider Shade of Pale by Procol Harum. Now, in our Peeling Syd series on the King of Paint, I believe I discussed this to some degree. The white on white painting that Mr. Barrett supposedly made and was proud of, and this notion of a wider shade of pale. I will point to a lyric here in a bit that kind of explains that. Let's go through, and I will give you the kind of as much background as theories as I can kind of understand as we read through them. Okay, so the first portion is, I am he, as you are me, we are all together. Now that come together, we are all together, sounds very similar. I just want to point out that in Echoes, the song Echoes, this idea of we are all together and seeing all these different things is specifically mentioned by Pink Floyd in that song. So, and that's in the second verse of Echoes, that you look at someone and you see yourself. And Mr. Waters specifically discusses the nature of this and how it's kind of a turning point in his writing. It's the same basic theme and idea that's presented here. So the next line, so I'm going to give a point for that. Okay, I'll just give a point for that, for Syd Barrett / Pink Floyd. Now, the nature of using Lewis Carroll and whatever else, some people might say, well, Syd liked to use nursery rhymes and stuff, but I don't know of him using a whole lot of Lewis Carroll stuff. I can't think of examples of it. But if you can, then put it in the comments. So, see how they run like pigs from a gun, see how they fly, I'm crying. Now, of course, pigs flying is this idea of this giant pig balloon was used by Pink Floyd later as well, so that's 2 points. Okay, sitting on a cornflake, waiting for a van to come. Now, a number of these kind of rhymes are pulled together by a nursery rhyme, and there's a backstory for this kind of that's relayed, and I'll kind of give you that. I'll kind of give you that call out here. The portion of it that I don't fully understand is Mr. Lennon, who supposedly wrote this, is saying that he's asking for what someone else's memory of the nursery rhyme is. You would think that if he remembered it, he wouldn't ask someone else to tell him what it is. But I don't know. Perhaps there's something else going on. So let's continue on. Corporation T-shirt, Stupid Bloody Tuesday. Now this Yellow Matter Custard, I believe, is from the same rhyme. And Dripping from a Dead Dog's Eye. It's all variations of that nursery rhyme. So hopefully I'll throw that comparison up here. You can see the comparison and you'll recognize the variation that's being used. So what is meant by the Eggman? Well, for some people, this is a Lewis Carroll reference and potentially ties in not only with Humpty Dumpty of Through the Looking Glass, but also the Carpenter and the Walrus. Whether that's actually happening, I don't know. But some people believe this is a reference to Eric Burdon. The reason for that is supposedly that Lennon gave him the name Eggs for Breakfast because his name is Eric Burdon, or EB. And there is also kind of an underground story about Mr. Burdon using or cracking eggs on groupies as kind of something he would do. So that may be the reason for the Eggman reference. Of course, the question then is, why isn't he saying he is the Eggman? Why is he saying I am the Eggman? I don't know. I don't have a good answer for that. It's a little bit odd. Of course, a lot of this just could be nonsense, but I don't know. Okay, the next portion for me that's strange is this idea of sitting in an English garden and waiting for the sun. Now, someone that likes to garden, I know, is Syd Barrett, so I'll give a point for that. That's 3 points. I know that Syd Barrett liked to work in a garden. He did it for a very long time. Yet there's no sun. You can get a tan from standing in the English rain. Okay, that is very similar in sentiment to the David Bowie song that mentions being well hung with a snow white tan. And I mean, it's just kind of odd that that's in here, and that same kind of sentiment of being in a condition that would cause someone to be pale or whatever else is tied in with the idea of being tan, which is the opposite of what would happen. So I don't know, it's just odd. And it's odd that perhaps David Bowie is copying it later. I don't know. Let's continue on. Is there anything else? There are some political statements, and supposedly there is a bit in here about elementary penguins singing Hare Krishna being a disdain for organized religion, which makes sense to me anyway. Supposedly, Mr. Lennon had been hanging out with Beats, and they were discussing this, and that is the source also for the kicking of Edgar Allan Poe. I swore, and this is one of the reasons this episode has taken so long, is I swore there was another just kind of odd reference to Edgar Allan Poe made by someone else in another song. I thought it was Pink Floyd or Syd, perhaps Mark Bolan. I haven't been able to find it. If you know of it, can you throw it in the comments for me, please? I really thought there was someone else who made this kind of strange reference, oddball reference to Edgar Allan Poe in a song. So that's pretty much it for that. I want to note a few things, though, that I guess perhaps one last thing, which is that there is a King Lear dramatic reading that is added to this specific song, and that's, of course, King Lear is a Shakespearean play. Within Peeling Syd Barrett, we specifically call out the many Shakespearean references from The Tempest, from Romeo and Juliet, and of course from Hamlet, that are made in a number of his songs. Hamlet, of course, could correspond to this idea of being in a river and floating. For Ophelia, we've already discussed how that can be here also in these Beatles songs. But I wouldn't say overtly that they have been directly Shakespearean references until this. There is a direct King Lear dramatic reading that is just kind of cut up and added into this song, strangely, and that's something that we know Syd liked to do, is make references to Shakespeare. So I'm going to add another point. So I have a 4. Now, this idea of cutting up ideas and kind of throwing them together, we know is something Mr. Barrett liked to do also because of his artwork. And you can check out Fart and Joy, which is just a very strange collection of almost like mixed media art, where he cuts up a lot of ideas and just kind of throws them together. So, the idea of tearing up a King Lear and throwing it into the song is a little bit odd, especially for the Beatles. They hadn't done something like that before. Now, consider the content of King Lear. What is King Lear about? King Lear is about a king who gives away his kingdom to his children and is basically punished for that. He's a fool. He's considered to be a fool because he throws away the only thing that gives him any form of power to protect his youngest daughter who actually is good. His 2 older daughters are kind of twisted and corrupt, but his youngest daughter is good. And because of his lack of wisdom, his kingdom is just kind of torn apart, and everything of value is destroyed. Well, what king, who likes to reference himself as a king and lost everything? Not John Lennon, not Paul McCartney. That also would seem to be a possible reference secondarily to Mr. Barrett. So I'll give one more point. So we end up with a score of 5 for this. If you believe if that King Lear reference is being made just on the side and it doesn't actually mean anything, I mean, you're totally entitled to that opinion. For me, it's very suspect. It's very strange. Okay, so we have two more. We have 2 more songs to go. The next song is Strawberry Fields. So let's go ahead and take a look at Strawberry Fields Forever, which is really a wonderful song. Now, one of the videos I suggested you watch is like You Can't Unhear This, about the editing of Strawberry Fields Forever. Now, if you've been paying attention, you will know already that that there has been extensive editing in other songs that predated this song. So the idea that that Strawberry Fields is doing something incredibly different by using different speeds or different timing, or different or changing in key, all of that has been done before. And I don't know. I mean, I appreciate what the person put together for that, but the development of the Beatles' music over time is using this tape looping and Verispeed to generate odd sounds within a number of their songs that we've already discussed. So certainly Strawberry Fields is doing this, but it's not, in my opinion, it's not the first one to do so. They've been doing that on a number of songs previous to this. And we didn't even discuss Rain, a song by them that is one of the earlier songs to kind of mess around with a lot of this. So let's go ahead and look at the lyrics. If you would, call up Strawberry Fields Forever. We're going to look at them, and I will kind of break those down and then jump into the kind of some background history of this, and then we'll see what we come up with. So first, let me take you down, because I'm going to Strawberry Fields. Now, Strawberry Fields, this is a place that's kind of personal for Mr. Lennon. We'll get into this a little bit later. That's the pop history of that. That's the first possible meaning, and we'll get into that a little bit more. So, take you down, going to Strawberry Fields, nothing is real. So, fields and real is a simple rhyme, nothing to get hung about, Strawberry Fields Forever. Again, odd rhyming, odd timing of the lyrics that fits the meter very well, and then ends with Strawberry Fields Forever. Okay. Living is easy with eyes closed, next verse. You misunderstand everything you see. It's getting hard to be someone, but it all works out. It doesn't matter much to me. Okay, so closed, you see, getting hard to be. So C and B, someone, but it all works out. It doesn't matter much to me. So it's C, B, and me. Let me take you down. Okay, so then there's the chorus. No one, I think, is in my tree. Must be high or low. You can't, tune in, but it's all right. That is, I think it's not too bad. That's just such a wonderful idea. It's, I haven't read this until now, so it's really, really great. No one, I think, is in my tree, so it must be high or low. That is, you can't, tune in, but it's all right. That is, I think it's not too bad. I don't know. Whoever made that is really wonderful. So what do I see there? Tree, high or low? You can't tune in. It's all right. I don't see any rhyme in there at all. But it's not too bad. It's just wonderful. Again, the chorus. Always know sometimes, think it's me. But I know when it's a dream. I think a no will mean a yes, but it's all wrong. That is, I think I disagree. So there's me and dream. disagree. So me, dream, and disagree. Long E. No alliteration really going on. Most of the interest in this for me is the wordplay, which is a little bit. It's very reminiscent of nonsense, with negatives being used. That is used in All You Need Is Love. So very, very similar to All You Need Is Love, which we'll kind of tear apart here in a moment. So someone's really having a lot of fun with the meanings of words and kind of tearing them apart. I assume this is mostly attributed to Mr. Lennon. So let's go ahead then and let's delve into some of the possible secondary meanings, and we'll give it a Syd score and everything else. So now the first thing is there's a lot of varispeed, a lot of change in time. Even the film for the video that was shot for this uses backwards motion in it. So there's quite a bit of reference to speeding up and slowing down and doing things in reverse for lyrics and things like that. And we've discussed that to some degree with Led Zeppelin 4. And also I would like to point out the idea of playing things backwards is discussed in the song like Dominoes. So this is important, of course, because in Syd Barrett's interview that Syd Barrett discusses the singles, he goes through and he specifically discusses timing, speeding up and slowing down. He does it out of the blue. It doesn't seem to match the dialogue. Where is he getting that from? Well, if he's a fan of the Beatles, he may simply know that they're doing that. Of course, if you are of the mindset that perhaps he was working with the Beatles, that would give him enough knowledge on the topic to kind of discuss it and mess with people. And so he may be messing with people with the knowledge that he has of varispeed. I just want to point that out. And I'll encourage you to go watch him discussing the singles, like 67, I think. And all the strange references he's making to speed and timing, and it permeates that interview. So where's he getting that from? Well, they're doing quite a bit of it here and in a number of Beatles songs, as we have mentioned. Whether they're doing that in any of the Piper at the Gates of Dawn stuff, I don't really know. I don't know that they were. So let's go ahead and see if we can get a little bit more information about the lyrics. Now, first off, I just want to say this is most likely tied to Lennon's memory of Strawberry Field for Kids, which is run by Salvation Army, that is tied to his own personal youth in Liverpool area. So that would seem to explain the idea of Strawberry Fields. Now, is there a potential secondary meaning that's kind of happening here? I don't know. Okay, so let's see. We'll kind of run through some of the secondary potential meanings of Strawberry Fields. So I'm going to take you down. Now, what does that mean, I'm going to take you down? There's only, in my mind, there are two reasons why you bring somebody down. One is you want to take someone down, so you're going to take them down to the fields or take them out there. That's the literal meaning. The secondary meanings are, let me take you down, as in I'm going to bring you down, as in you're going to be depressed. Another meaning is that we're going down because this could be a sexual reference. I'm going down. Okay? Physically going down. So let's continue on with the content, and you decide what you think, if any of those apply. We're going to Strawberry Fields. Okay. Well, so if we're going down literally, we're going to go down to Strawberry Fields. That means we're going to go down to the place that Mr. Lennon knew as a child. Now, if we're getting down or depressed, why would Strawberry Fields be depressing someone? I don't really know. But the next line kind of gives more context to that. Nothing is real to get hung about. Why would you get hung about something? Well, you could get hung up on something or a memory, or get hung up on kind of the past of your youth. It could be quite depressing. Strawberry Fields Forever would be quite depressing in that case because it would represent the loss of youth. Now, the third thing is that, as we mentioned, is that it could be a metaphor for going down, which could be a sexual metaphor. And Strawberry Fields in that case, since fields often are used, a field or the ocean is often referenced to female. So going to Strawberry Fields down, nothing to get hung about. Hung about, obviously, could also be a another sexual reference. So, well hung with a snow white tan, as the David Bowie lyric. So, I don't know. I mean, that's three things. Even using context, I can point to three things in each one of those interpretations that would make them equally plausible. You'll have to decide on your own. So let's continue with the context and see if we can figure out kind of what's going on. Living is easy with eyes closed, but you don't understand what you see. It's getting hard to be someone, but it all works out. Now, that reminds me of Sylvia Plath, where she mentions how hard it is to be yourself. It's easier to be someone else. And Sylvia Plath, of course, is someone that we've noted may have been an influence on Mr. Barrett and Pink Floyd. So I'll give a point for that. What all that could mean, I don't know. It doesn't matter much to me. Kind of being offhanded about all of these things is something that Mr. Barrett often kind of is this kind of sentiment that he relays. But I won't give a point for that. I mean, Mr. Lennon also could be kind of offhand about certain things. So let's continue on to the next verse where no one is in my tree, it must be high or low. This idea of being high or low is tied within many of Mr. Barrett and Pink Floyd's lyrics. I'll give one more point. So I'm at 8. Hopefully I'm not repeating that one. That is, you can't, tune in, but it's all right. That is, I think it's not too bad. So that's a psychedelic reference. Certainly, the idea of tuning in. But it's not too bad. I don't know. I mean, let's continue to the next verse. Always know, sometimes think it's me. I know when it's a dream. So this idea of knowing things through dreams is something Mr. Barrett does. A no will mean a yes, but it's all wrong. I think I disagree. I really, really don't know. Again, I'll point you to Little Red Rooster, which is a painting which may be relaying an idea. It is all in red, and it may tie in with this if you are of the mindset that perhaps Mr. Barrett had something to do with this. Overall, I end up with a score of 8. There is not enough information, in my opinion, to make a decision on what exactly is meant by Strawberry Fields. There's still 3 possibilities, and perhaps they're all being done at the same time simultaneously, but they're equally weighted, and there is not enough information in this song for me to feel very strongly either way. Perhaps the last verse where it mentions it's all in a dream, I think a no means a yes, it's all wrong, I think I'll disagree, appears to be a relational kind of a disagreement, discussion, or misunderstanding. And in that case, I still don't know which one of the 3 it would be. So I don't know. You'll have to decide which one you think it might be. That's pretty much it for Strawberry Fields Forever. So the last song that I want to discuss is kind of an important one. It's a wonderful song, All You Need Is Love. So if you would pull that up, and let's take a look at the lyrics for All You Need Is Love. So let's go ahead. It starts off with love, 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 just kind of repeating. Nothing you can do that can't be done. Okay, nothing you can sing that can't be sung, so done and sung. Nothing you can say, but you can learn how to play the game. It's easy. So say, play the game. Now that's bordering on alliteration, but also clanging, inline rhyme. So nothing you can make that isn't made. No one you can save that can't be saved. Nothing you can do, but you can learn how to be you in time. It's easy. Now this odd rhythm and this kind of repetitive alliteration is something Syd likes to do. So I'm going to give 2 points. 1, 2. Let's continue on. All you need is love. All you need is love. Love is all you need. Now, this idea of just wanting love, and it's also expressed by Mr. Barrett, but a lot of people have done so, so I won't get into that too much. Nothing you can know that isn't known. Nothing you can see that isn't shown. So known and shown. Nowhere you can be that isn't where you're meant to be. It's easy. What a lovely expression. Really is great. And that's pretty much it. It just repeats from there on out. So it's extremely simple. There is one last thing that I kind of... Well, let's break down some ideas real quick. The first is that in Remember a Day, which is released in June of '68, there is a very specific Pink Floyd line that is, "Sing a song that can't be sung." Which is very similar. Very similar expression, so I'll give a point for that. Although that is, I believe, after this song is already out. There are cut-ups of the French national anthem. Again, cut-ups and thrown into the song, which, as we mentioned, is something that Mr. Barrett likes to do. So that also is kind of suspect. And the last thing that I'll mention is this kind of, we mentioned this before, the D variation that was noted to be something that Mr. Barrett likes to do. So I'll kind of show you what that sounds like really quickly in this song. It's similar to the ones that we called out previously, but it does have variation. It uses what is called a D6. So nothing you can say, but you can learn how to play the game. It's easy. So I'll try and just play the D variation for you. Okay? It's easy. I don't know if you can hear that or not. But as we mentioned, that's something that Syd liked to play around with, was D variations. There it is again. It also was in Hide Your Love Away. Okay, different, but similar. The similar idea of ending on a D with some D variation. So I'll give 1 more point for that. So I am at 4. Any other notes on All You Need Is Love? I guess that's about it. It does have a strange bit of timing and rhythm. So I kind of noted that already, but I won't go into that too much. Now there is one more song I want to do, which is Magical Mystery Tour. This won't take very long. I forgot I wanted to do this one. So if you would, call up Magical Mystery Tour. And we'll just look at this one really, really quick. I'm not gonna talk about this one too much. Now, the reason this is important to me is because, again, it uses this carnival barker, fairground barker idea, and that is captured within Mr. Barrett's song, "The Octopus or Clowns and Jugglers." Roll up for the mystery tour. Roll up for the mystery tour. There's an invitation. Make a reservation. It's waiting to take you away. That's all there really is to the song. I just want to point out, I'll give 1 point, that this song also is using this idea of a carnival barker or a fairground caller that is a hype man, and this same idea is called out in Octopus and Clowns and Jugglers. I'll kind of give you the lyrics here for that. So that's pretty much it for my talk. This has been quite extensive. Thank you for your patience. And what I wanted to do was go through and show you all the different things that perhaps the Beatles had influenced on Pink Floyd and Syd Barrett, and also what may be influences of Syd Barrett and Pink Floyd on the Beatles, perhaps if they were working together. Now, there are only so many ways of looking at this. I mean, one is that they're just coincidental, and there's enough material there that you're going to have some overlap just by chance. A secondary thing is that perhaps people are influencing one another simply by them hearing things and then recycling them, which people do all the time. Subconsciously, even, we do this. A third thing is that some people consciously will copy one another because they like something, so that they will do that. And the fourth is, of course, the possibility of cooperation. So you decide kind of what you think is happening there, but there is no doubt in my mind the similarities between early Pink Floyd and early Beatles are quite extensive, and a lot of the follow-up Pink Floyd music is expressing a lot of the same ideas that is here for some reason. It's either human inclination to do so, or there's something else going on. Now, the last thing that I would kind of like to mention is, of course, there's a lot of work that goes into these videos. I have a number of new people that have subscribed. Thank you if you've done that. And the final, I guess, idea, one of the reasons that I've been struggling with putting this together is one of my favorite videos, which is my Did Syd Dark Side of Oz. It's the third video of the Did Syd Dark Side of the Moon. They have, for some reason, pushed it out of the algorithm. So if you actually go and do Did Syd Dark Side of Oz search in YouTube, my video is way down, and that's almost the direct title for that video, which means for some reason somebody doesn't like that video and it's being kind of hidden. Now, earlier and later videos of the Did Syd Dark Side show up in that search, but not that video. So for some reason, and that video for me was not only a lot of work, it's something that I was happy to put together. I think it's expressing something that's very valuable, possibly. Even if it's just the interpretation or the story behind the possibility, it's a wonderful thing to contemplate. And so I'm a little bit distressed that that's kind of been buried. That's something that I wanted to last for a really long time. And I've been dealing with kind of the idea that I put in all that work and it's just going to be buried, you know. But whatever. It's good, I think, to be able to express ideas, and I hope other people feel the same way, that in the same way that, not to get into the Bible too much, but in the same way that people would haggle with God about what the absolute ideas were of what is okay. And one of the stories is the story of destruction of a city. And so a man is asking God, you know, what if I can find 10 good people in the city? Would you still destroy it? And God's like, no, I wouldn't if there's 10 good people. And there's a haggling that's happening, you know. This is all Old Testament. What if there's only 5 good people in this city? Would you still destroy it? And God's kind of like, no. You know, that haggling with what is absolute and necessary, I think, is a very valuable process. And what are the absolutes of life? And are people internally haggling with themselves? Are we able to discuss these absolute ideas with one another to come to an agreement of what is reasonable? I don't know, but I do hope that the videos I'm making are encouraging people to kind of ask questions and participate in a process of thought. To me, that is extremely valuable. It's more valuable than the videos. It's the real value is in the idea that it is acceptable and expected to review one another's thoughts, and in doing so, to come out the other side better. Not just for me, and not just for you, but for everyone as a whole. That process, which is tied innately to democracy, of course, but even more importantly, it's tied to the development, the mutual development of self, spirit, mind, and political structure, social structure. All of these things, they're all tied to the idea of cooperative development, and not without disagreement now. Disagreement is inherent to that process. How many good people do you really need to find to justify the existence of a city? I don't know. I mean, that's for each person to kind of decide. But to me, without that involvement of discussion and haggling, which can be extremely irritating, but also can be kind of funny if you're able to step back and just kind of laugh at the process. It's necessary, in my opinion, and it's extremely valuable. At any rate, thanks for watching all the way through. I knew this was going to be a really, really long video. It's part of the reason it took so long to put together. But thanks for watching. If you stuck through all the way to the end, please give a like, share, subscribe. If you know other folks that would enjoy it, please forward the material. And I will talk to you folks later. Oh, there will be at least one more video. I'm going to do late Beatles period, and we'll take a look at that, as well as John Lennon's solo material. All for now.